Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. A monumental day in Canadian politics yesterday is leading to some monumental questions. As Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announces his plan to step down, who is going to replace him? What happens now that Parliament is paused? And how will his successor handle Donald Trump as he returns to the White House and muses about making this country the 51st state? Amid all of this, how are businesses feeling with the political uncertainty and threats of those massive tariffs from south of the border? I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. What do you think of Justin Trudeau's decision to step down as Prime Minister and Liberal Party leader? Who do you think ought to replace him? What is your reaction to Parliament being prorogued? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950 across our great, big, beautiful province. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. You can also hit pound 690. Please be pulled over or hands-free on your cell phone. You can also email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Now, as we heard yesterday, after 9 years in power, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau plans to step down as Prime Minister and Liberal leader once the party chooses a new leader. Parliament has been prorogued until the end of March, and plenty of names are being bandied about as replacements. Among them, former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, former BC Premier Christy Clark, and within the government, Chrystia Freeland, Dominic LeBlanc, Francois-Philippe Champagne, and Anita Anand are just a few names being suggested. Before we get to our guests and to your calls and emails, here is BC Premier David Eby talking about the Prime Minister and plans for the premiers to meet.
Without doubt, there were moments of frustration that I'm sure went in both directions. But we got some big things done together. Childcare. He got the country through a global pandemic, and this is a big shift for him and for his family. I want to wish them luck with their next steps. And given the state of the federal government currently, the leadership on this file has come from the premiers across Canada. And so we're going to continue to do that work. We have a meeting this week, the premiers, to discuss how we can coordinate in light of the recent announcement of the federal government and the fact that the leadership will continue to need to come from the provincial governments and the territorial governments across Canada. And we're prepared to do that, and we will do that.
BC Premier David Eby. Now, in less than 2 weeks, Donald Trump will return to the White House after he is inaugurated for a second time on January 20th. He talked about Trudeau's departure today, but also suggested he would use, quote, economic force to join Canada and the U.S. together.
Economic force, because Canada and the United States, that would really be something. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, and you take a look at what that looks like, and it would also be much better for national security. Don't forget, we basically protect Canada. But here's the problem with Canada. So many friends up there. I love the Canadian people. They're great. But we're spending hundreds of billions a year to protect it. We don't need their cars. You know, they make 20% of our cars. We don't need that. I'd rather make them in Detroit. We don't need the cars. We don't need their lumber. We have massive fields of lumber. We don't need their lumber.
U.S. President Donald Trump speaking at Mar-a-Lago earlier today. And in the past little while, we've had some response from the outgoing Prime Minister. Justin Trudeau says on X, quote, there isn't a snowball's chance in hell that Canada would become part of the United States. Workers and communities in both our countries benefit from being each other's biggest trading and security partner. Lots to get through. Let's join our guest now, Professor Sanjay Jeram, and he's a senior lecturer in political science at Simon Fraser University. Sanjay, you've been very kind to join us, been busy throughout yesterday and today. First of all, how do you think, let's go to yesterday, how do you think Trudeau handled his departure?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think no matter what he did, no matter what he said, the majority response, I think, amongst the public and many in the political class would say that he just simply took too long, and there's really no excuse for that. But I mean, if you really look at the content of his words, I think, he was gracious, he was humble, he seemed genuine in his demeanor. Again, now the question also is, did he make the right decision by proroguing Parliament and essentially staying on as Prime Minister effectively for what could be a couple months versus resigning immediately and passing off to someone else within the party? That's a tough question. There's no good answer to it, but I think that he handled himself well.
A monumental challenge, as we've said, for whoever replaces Justin Trudeau will be a new Trump administration and his suggestion Canada become a 51st state. We've heard the Prime Minister's response there to the idea of using economic force to join our two countries. What do you think of what Trump has been saying and the response we're hearing, at least recently, from the Prime Minister?
Well, I mean, it's hard to comment on this in a very serious way because I do think at this point, it's political posturing. I'm not sure that this is really constitutes a genuine policy proposal from Trump and his future administration at this point. I think it's really just, the way Trump does politics is that he's using this as sort of a way to kind of threaten and pressure, which again, that's a tactic that he used, and we all, all familiar with that tactic because he has a goal in mind, which is to essentially what he thinks create a relationship with Canada that benefits the United States more, and he's using the threat of tariffs and the threats of essentially in that speech he was saying that Canada doesn't really offer much to the United States and might as well. We've been there, in our benefit to become part of the United States. It's not really worked out or hashed out as some sort of like proper proposal at this point. Obviously, like joining two sovereign countries is no joke in terms of like managing the sort of financial debts of both countries, just at the beginning, how the institutions work, there's just a myriad of things. It's not something that's easily done, especially, and there's not a lot of precedent with two liberal democracies. We have, we have obviously in the history of global politics, mergers and acquisitions through different circumstances, but a sort of merger between two liberal democracies like this, that's not, there's no template for that. So at this point, it's really just, speculate. I think it's just political posturing.
No precedent at the moment. So I do want to get to calls. Let's go to those now. Roman joins us from Port Alberni. Thanks for waiting, Roman. What do you make of the last few days' events?
Well, I agree completely with the fact that he still holds the title of Prime Minister. Trudeau has embodied the statement, you either die the hero or live long enough to become the villain. And with everything as absolutely out of whack as it is right now, he waited to the worst moment possible to finally give up what he had to give up. And if I may add, in terms of any worries or any even advocacy for us as Canada, as a nation, there are so many responsibilities tied to being a sovereign nation, being part of the Commonwealth, that all I can say to anyone worried about this in any degree or fashion is two words: Trump stakes. Okay, he's almost like once he gets on something, he'll gnaw on it till it's not worth anything anymore. All the juice is out of it. All the meat is off the bone, if you will. Right now, what we need to be concerning ourselves is this: where are we actually supposed to be looking if everyone wants us to look at this instead? Are we being fed something to distract us? What do they call that from all the way back in the Roman Empire? The loaves and something, where they want us to be distracted from what the real agenda might be and what the real goings-on are. That's my take on the whole matter.
Okay. Roman, can I ask you, if I may, who would you like or who do you think ought to replace the Prime Minister?
It would be almost right now not worth me to give a name because no one has proven themselves worthy of such a seat. Right now, we need to, as the only thing I think that can deal with this properly is a proper election. And I'm not saying it out of spite to any party or the other. I would rather see platforms, and I would rather see our democracy perform its due diligence and duty, and us as voters uphold our due diligence and duties as voters, not to vote with passion, but to vote with passionate knowledge and education.
All right. Roman, appreciate your call. Thanks very much. Let's go to Maya in Vancouver. Maya, what do you make of the Prime Minister's move to step down, and who might replace him?
Oh, I feel absolutely disappointed, even disgusted. This has been coming. He knows that his approval rating is down to the zero, and he waited in the worst possible way to resign, abandon Canada right now when we have to negotiate with Donald Trump. Look at our interests. 100%. But not only Justin Trudeau, it's the NDP supporting them and giving them, I don't even know what. So in general, nothing good is going to come from the Liberal government. They got to go. We have to go to election. Listen to the Canadians. I don't usually go to podcast and social media, but recently I went, checked. Oh my God, CBC, you guys don't even know what's happening out there. There's so many podcasts and so much misinformation, and I don't know where to start and where to stop. So it's a tragedy for our country. It's a big tragedy. I've been here for 25 years. I never seen such a downfall for Canada.
Okay. Maya, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Before we get to Simone in Surrey, Sanjay, I want to ask you, some of the names being bandied about as a possible replacement for Justin Trudeau. We've mentioned Christy Clark, Jonathan Wilkinson, North Vancouver MP, Federal Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. Let's talk about first the BC possibilities. What do you think of their chances?
I think they're both outsider candidates. I wouldn't put. I mean, Christy Clark is an interesting one because even though I would call her sort of an outsider candidate, there's others who might say that she's actually one of the three front runners. If you look at it from the perspective of if the Liberals take a more sort of long-term perspective on how to select a leader in terms of somebody who has no attachment to the Trudeau regime. But Jonathan Wilkinson, I don't really think is really considered that high on the list, especially from those who already have seats in the House of Commons. Christy Clark presents an interesting option because certainly what the Liberal Party needs right now, at least from the outside, is they need to move back to the center and to sort of reclaim that space, especially when it comes to the image the public has of their economic management skills. And I think Christy Clark might present that in some ways because, despite, of course, no premier gets out their criticism, I think it would be, she could present a very good case that, during her time as premier of BC, that she made some, that she did handle the finances of the province quite well. And so I think, and obviously does not have a record of being sort of associated with a further left agenda that at this point is becoming sort of baggage for the Liberal Party. So I think that she presents a viable option from that respect. But I mean, the fact that she's her French and ability to sort of connect in Quebec, and the Liberals can't win without sort of sweeping Quebec. That's just a non-starter. So that makes her less attractive, I think, out of the get-go. So I would say she's still an outsider. Let's talk about those who may be more closely aligned. Let's say cabinet ministers or former cabinet ministers: Chrystia Freeland, Dominic LeBlanc, François-Philippe Champagne, Anita Anand, just a few of the names. Who do you, and Mark Carney as well, not in cabinet, but was an economic advisor to the Liberal government. Who's in the lead right now, do you think? Well, Chrystia Freeland, I mean, I'm just going off the polls that we have, which is limited, but still it's useful information, that Freeland has had a bump in her popularity since her resignation. And that aligns, I think, with, what you'd expect, is that she showed gumption, backbone. She, made a tough decision. And I think people respect that. And she also was clear with the policy that she disagreed with, that sort of put her over the edge, even though she'd been obviously clearly unhappy for some time. And I think that particular being that clear and precise, I think resonated with some disgruntled Liberal members and maybe some sort of extended members of the public. So I think that makes sense. I think, and the Liberals also, beyond Quebec, they need to win with women. That's a constituency that's been pretty important to their electoral victories. And it does seem that, if you look at the gender balance I think it was an Nanos poll, it was interesting to look at, is that it does seem like there's that she's gaining popularity amongst women. And so that also puts her in a good position. So I think, I wouldn't be surprised if there is a movement that starts to build in support of her candidacy, especially if you're just sort of taking those inside cabinet, especially that kind of group that you mentioned there. I think she stands out at the moment. Mark Carney, again, very interesting. A different take, and one if you kind of hold the position that nobody within the Trudeau cabinet could possibly rid themselves of his stain essentially at this point, then Carney becomes an interesting, attractive option. So I think to me, I would put Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland as if I again I'm just wildly speculating here, but I would put them as if I had to bet, I would suspect one of the two of them is going to become leader.
Okay. Let's go to Simone, who's been waiting on the line in Surrey. Simone, what do you make of the Prime Minister stepping down, and who might replace him?
I think it's a sad day for Canada, and I feel he didn't quite have much of a choice. I find it fascinating that a lot of pundits keep saying that he should have stepped down sooner. However, had Kamala Harris won in the U.S., I think we'd be having an entirely different conversation today. We also had the foreign interference inquiry, which unfortunately only CBC and Radio Canada have really been talking about it. And I think once that report comes out and people are more aware of how compromised Pierre Poilievre is, specifically with the very same government that assassinated one of our residents in Surrey and has been responsible for extorting Surrey businesses. I think once that comes to light, people will start looking at Pierre Poilievre very differently.
Okay. And Simone, just to clarify, those are allegations that the government of Canada has made against the government of India. They have not been conclusively proven in a court of law, but I hear what you're saying. On the idea of around a robust liberal leadership race, who would you like to see emerge victorious?
Well, just to clarify, those allegations have been confirmed by CSIS, and also, Radio Canada also did a great expose on Michelle Rempel-Garner and how she was confronted by Indian officials. So that's where my information is coming
Fair
from.
enough.
And it is going to be released in the report at the end of January. As far as leaders go, I'm glad we're having a leadership race. I think we're getting something that they should have had in the U.S., where we get to see the difference between each candidate. I do hope we go more fiscally conservative. I do believe we need to bring back more climate change initiatives, because I think too many of, even in BC, they're sliding away from that, and there's a silent majority out there that is craving it, and I do believe we still need to keep our socially progressive policies as Liberals always have.
Okay. Simone, thanks for your call. Sanjay, the question has been raised around the timing of a leadership race. Realistically, how much time does the Liberal Party need to hold a race that people think is or believe is credible?
I mean, it's a challenging question. I mean, the March 24th date is quick. 3 months would be sort of, I think, the kind of shortest kind of period of time you might argue is sort of to have a robust campaign, to let all of the contenders sort of make their case to Liberal membership, to have potentially some kind of debates and things like that. I'm not sure I could really give you anything more specific than that. It's really the national executive can really have some flexibility in terms of how they manage the situation. But 3 months to me, kind of thinking back on some of the other leadership campaigns that have run, 3 months seems about right. This is going to be really quick if they need to have a leader in place. Let's say early March would probably be when they need a leader. That's not a lot of time. And so I'm sure that the serious candidates are working fiercely behind the scenes right now, even though we haven't really seen any kind of major action on that front yet. But I don't think it'll be long, considering it's going to be a short campaign.
Although we can also assume, perhaps, that some of them have been working at this quite a while before the Prime Minister announced this.
That's a bit different. Obviously, of course, in terms of like managing support within the caucus and sort of managing who's going to run their team. Yeah, all of that sort of background work. But there's still, again, I don't exactly know because the national executive could change the rules, but I think they can change the rules or make a sort of an emergency decision. But the leadership rules for the Liberal Party, I think all other parties at this point, are more or less one member, one vote systems. And in fact, if you remember back when Justin Trudeau was elected leader, they actually allowed people to vote who just simply expressed an interest in Liberal membership rather than actually formal membership. So there is a strong public-facing component to the leadership campaign. It's not just convincing your colleagues, right? So a lot of that stuff can happen. Yes, can be probably going on for months, but to really kind of turn to the public and Liberal members is a different story, and that would take time as well, but that's going to happen on a sort of compressed schedule.
All right. More calls coming in, and we will continue this into the second half hour. Cam and Cobble Hill, what do you make of the Prime Minister stepping down, and who might replace him?
Well, I think he should have done it before. Who will replace him? I'm not impressed with any of them. I think we should have an election, is what should happen. And I think he takes a place in history, in my opinion, along with his father, is probably two of the worst prime ministers in Canadian history.
What is it about his leadership and his time in office that stands out to you in terms of negativity?
Well, I think it's not reported on enough as how much debt Canada has taken on. I think it was we had balanced budgets before under Stephen Harper, and that's completely gone to the wayside. I mean,
except for during the economic crisis of 2008, during the Great Recession.
Yeah, everything. But I mean, before we had balances, and now we're in the deficit something fierce, and we're dealing with Mr. Trump to the south, which is a huge can of worms. And now we're in a position where we're really, really in bad shape. And I think CBC's got to look at a few things like the debt and bring that up more often. Also, the Columbia River Treaty, which is, I mean, it's I guess it's federal and having to do with the U.S. We've heard nothing on that. And Canada now, we're an exporter of everything. Most of our gasoline comes from Washington State, and yet it's Canadian oil, and we get gouged for it. So I'm very, very worried for my family and worried for myself, just the way everything has gone. I think we're in a bad way.
Okay. Cam, we appreciate it. We're just up against the clock here. Sanjay, last word. And in fact, we have to go to break now. Sanjay Jeram, we really appreciate your time and your expertise joining us on a busy couple of days. And I'm sure we'll check in with you once again very soon. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Sanjay Jeram joining us from SFU. You are listening to BC Today. Let's go to a couple of your emails now. Karen in Victoria called the open line to say the Liberals made a big mistake in airing this out in public. The Trudeau bashing should have been done behind closed doors. Trudeau handled this with grace, people complaining about him, but who's stepping up to replace him? Scott writes, the only way to give progressive voters real options is for the Greens, NDP, and Liberals to coordinate backing the strongest progressive candidate in each riding to avoid vote splitting. Unfortunately, this is unlikely due to political hubris. Pierre Poilievre is set to become Prime Minister despite lacking the executive education or experience needed to lead. Rumors suggest the Liberals may select Christy Clark as a, quote, disposable leader to absorb the loss, preserving their brand for a future comeback. Progressives deserve better strategies and leadership. If you are still on the line with us, please stay on the line. We're going to continue this topic, lots to get through. And coming up in our second half hour, we are going to look at the economic impact, what businesses are saying. The Surrey Board of Trade is going to join us, and we're going to talk about what they hope to see out of Trudeau stepping down and what their successor may do. Let's go to actually one more email if we can. Rizia writes, I'm happy he stepped down. Not so happy he's effectively staying in power for several more months, though. I'm relieved and hopeful that now that the adults may return to the building, that's in quotes, people demonizing Poilievre are the best example of the childish, divisive narrative promoted during these last 9 years. Douglas writes, progressive Canadians at a riding-by-riding level where the non-woke Poilievre conservatives are bubbled in the polls must work together to support a single coalition candidate in the next election. Something we just heard. It's the only chance of deflating this billionaire-backed bubble. And Rosemary and Courtney writes, the world right now is facing a climate crisis, and the next PM of Canada will be forced, like it or not, to deal with the fallout. Fires, floods will be just part of it. Christy Clark was big on fossil fuels and started the total degradation of the Peace River Valley that is now Site C. That valley could have been our breadbasket with its incredible microclimate for growing just about everything. No to Christy. If you're just joining us, and we appreciate it, we are talking about the fallout from Justin Trudeau's announcement that he will step down. We will have more on that, who you think might replace him, who you think ought to replace him, and coming up, concerns from the business community, especially in light of the threat of tariffs from Donald Trump. This is BC Today on CBC. We are on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and, of course, on our CBC News News app. Coming up, an update, more of your calls and emails on Justin Trudeau stepping down, who might replace him, and what business leaders want from the next Prime Minister. Do you run a business, big or small? What do you want from Ottawa now? And how should the next PM handle our relationship with the U.S. as Trump returns to the White House? If you're on the line, stay on the line. That's after this news update with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. Police are asking people who live or work in the area of Douglas College or the New Westminster Courthouse to leave the area immediately. New West Police have tweeted the warning but have not released any details about the nature of the incident. They say officers have taken up positions in the area and road closures are in effect. Police say details will be provided as needed. Premier David Eby says he and his counterparts from across Canada will be heading to Washington, where President-elect Donald Trump will soon be inaugurated. He says the premiers will make their case against Trump's threat to impose 25% tariffs. Eby says the leadership on the tariff issue is coming from the premiers, and they plan to meet later this week. And an industry group says a large majority of BC's construction contractors are reporting a shortage of skilled workers. The Independent Contractors and Business Association says its recent survey shows 72% of respondents reported being affected by a lack of skilled tradespeople. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Periods of rain this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 10. Highs around 6 and mainly cloudy in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a chance of snow and freezing rain with a high of 0. Highs around 0 with increasing cloudiness in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly cloudy with a high of 4. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, cloudy this afternoon with highs around 7 degrees. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zimmerman, and thank you for joining us on CBC Radio 1, television, and live streaming on the CBC News app. We're also on our website, cbc.ca/BC, and on our CBC Vancouver YouTube page. At 3 p.m. today, our friends at On the Coast are putting on another jam-packed show. Gloria Makarenko, what have you got?
It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I'd like to flag a few things we've got lined up for On the Coast this afternoon. We're going to look ahead at what the new year may bring for the conflict in Ukraine. We'll speak to a woman who relocated to Canada from Ukraine this past year. We'll also hear from the Reverend at a Ukrainian Catholic cathedral. And just be honest now. At work, do you ever find yourself just trying to look busy? Well, we're going to talk more about busy work and why it just might be time to embrace slow productivity. So join us for On the Coast between 3 and 6.
Before we get to more of your calls and emails, we have a developing situation out of New Westminster. Police there are asking the public to immediately leave the area around Douglas College and the courthouse. This is in downtown. Police say a threat was made to the courthouse around 10:30 this morning. The CBC's Liam Britton joins us now in studio. Liam, what more do we know?
Yeah, Dan, still few details about this unusual situation, but we do have colleagues en route, and we are trying to work here in the newsroom to find out more information. But a very unusual situation in New Westminster, obviously. So New West Police did tell CBC that people are being told to leave that area. You mentioned around 8th and Royal, where Douglas College, the courthouse, is. Road closures are in place, but police couldn't say exactly which intersection, which roads are closed. They're trying to get people out of the area. So as you mentioned, 10:30 a.m., there was a threat made at the courthouse. Police are not speaking about what the nature of the threat is was at this time, but they're working with sheriffs, transit police, firefighters, paramedics, dog teams on the scene. So at 11 a.m., there was a tweet put out by New Westminster Police saying much the same, telling people that road closures are in effect and a perimeter has been established, and they're asking people to avoid the area. And about 20 minutes ago, Douglas College tweeted that due to this police situation, they are evacuating their New West campus. For those inside Douglas College, please evacuate towards 8th Street or Royal Avenue is the guidance from the college. So this does not affect the Coquitlam campus. This also does not affect the Anvil office tower, according to their tweet, and that's further down the hill in New Westminster, kind of closer to New West Station.
Yep.
And so, as I mentioned, our colleagues are on their way trying to get some information. They're heading to a media staging area that's being set up for media availability, Dan.
Okay, and we have seen, and from our viewers and listeners, thankfully, sending us video, we have seen police tape up around that area, heavy police presence. Certainly, Liam Britton, we appreciate your time. And for more on this, you could check our website, cbc.ca/BC, and we'll have all the very latest for you on radio as well as on television tonight. Liam Britton, thanks very much. Well, members of BC's business community are highlighting concerns around Justin Trudeau's resignation as Prime Minister. The Surrey Board of Trade says it's concerned about economic uncertainty as Trudeau prorogues Parliament, the Liberals head into a leadership race, and Donald Trump is less than 2 weeks away from taking office as U.S. President once again. We're asking you, what impact is Trudeau's resignation and Donald Trump returning to the White House going to have on the BC economy? Do you run a small business? What's it like amid this uncertainty? Call us now, 1-800-825-5950. Our number in Metro Vancouver, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. You can email bctoday@cbc.ca. We will get to your calls. We know we ask people as well to call in with their opinions on Justin Trudeau stepping down. Stick with those. Please come in with more of those calls as well. But we'd love to hear from some business owners, business operators, people who are concerned about their jobs. Jasroop Gosal is the spokesperson for the Surrey Board of Trade. Jasroop, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me on, Dan. It's a pleasure.
First of all, what's the local economic fallout you're feeling from the Prime Minister announcing he plans to step down?
Well, the Surrey Board of Trade, we do understand why the Prime Minister has made his decision to step down. We understand that the temperature in the room was that asking for him to step down for quite a while. But we are concerned about the proroguement of Parliament, as well as this leadership race happening where we don't know who the potential leader will be, and the legislation that is currently being debated not going to pass. And this could have some drastic implications for our business community.
We're going to get to a few of those more thoughts from Jasroop in just a moment. Angela's been waiting on the line. Angela in Vancouver, what do you make of Trudeau stepping down and his possible replacement?
Well, let me start with this. I think Christy Clark would be fantastic as a replacement. I think she has a strong financial record and would have the ability to capture the imagination of Canadians and what the future looks like. I think Chrystia Freeland, she's probably our strongest negotiator against Donald Trump, and which is why Trump and Elon Musk hate her. But she is strong, and either way, I'm sure she will be part of the negotiating team moving forward, whoever's there. I think we need to have a woman. There's so much on at stake right now. And what I would like to remind everybody is everything that the Liberal Party has done in the last, 10 years. We have the Canada Child Benefit. We have 18-month parental leave, which includes at least 5 weeks for fathers. We have the first-time homebuyers program. We have $10 a day daycare. We have EI expanded for self-employed people and tech people. We have increases in the middle-class tax bracket. We have we have what's happened on the international stage in terms of democracy, support of Ukraine. We have trade agreements with everyone in the G7. We have increases in student loan grants. We have cannabis legalized. I don't smoke it, but I know a lot of people do, and I'm glad they're not going to get arrested because they do what they like to do, smoke a joint once in a while. We have huge investments in science, probably the largest in Canadian history. We have increases in old age security and guaranteed income supplement. We had the retirement age reduced back to 65, and we've had huge investments in infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Canada needs a strong Liberal Party, mm-hmm. and it is so unfortunate that things have happened the way they have over the last year in terms of what was happening inside of the Liberal Party, and I understand why Justin Trudeau stepped down, but I think he was a fantastic Prime Minister, and I just want to see the Liberal Party, honest to God, get their, all their squabbling nonsense behind them, get their act together and put forward a strong leader that can take us forward.
Okay. Angela,
so my passionate...
Yeah, mildly passionate to say the least. Angela, we appreciate your call and your passion. Amid all that, we do have to note that generally in Canada, the lifespan of federal governments is between 8 and 10 years. This is relatively historically on par. We also have to mention, and we know we've heard criticism from other callers as well, the We Charity scandal, the SNC-Lavalin scandal, foreign interference, challenges with inflation. This government has certainly dealt with a lot, and there are various opinions on how it has handled all sorts of things. Jasroop, when you hear some of what that she's touting as the accomplishments of the Trudeau government, when you look back at some of the challenges, do you have a ranking for how Trudeau has done?
Well, we know that much of what Trudeau and the Liberal Party government has done for Canadians and for Canadian businesses, while it has been quite beneficial, the businesses on the ground, small mom and pop shops, medium-sized enterprises, and even large businesses have been struggling with not only the issues of inflation, supply chain issues, as well as high interest rates, but they've been dealing with excessive red tape, over taxation, mm-hmm. as well as redundant regulatory processes. And all of these items have stacked up against the Trudeau government and have had a significant negative impact on Canada's economy. Mm-hmm. And we only have to look at our GDP numbers. While they are better than most G7 countries, we know that businesses have been struggling, and that has had a negative impact on our GDP and our ability to grow and retain talent here in Canada.
Before we get to more calls, Jasroop, do you have specific things that you would like to see from a federal government, be it a Liberal government in power right now, and if the polls hold and there's an election, it may be a Conservative government? What do you want them to do to help small business?
Well, we are advocating for and have been advocating for a comprehensive taxation review where businesses are taxed at extremely high levels. While we don't know that reduction in taxation will be in the future, we do want to see a tax review performed. We want to make sure that there aren't any redundancies, that we aren't being double taxed, that the taxation that we are experiencing is adequate. We want to make sure that where there can be efficiencies made, that they are made. We also want to see that red tape is cut for our business community. We were pleased to see in the fall economic statement a couple weeks back that the federal government was planning on creating a office of red tape reduction mm-hmm. And efficiency. So we want to see that implemented. And we also know that infrastructure is critical for Canada, for our Canadian economy. One piece of infrastructure is ensuring that we have adequate public transportation. And Surrey has been left behind in that respect. And we need to make sure that those investments are being made, because that is another one reason why businesses choose to open up shop or choose to co-locate in the Metro Vancouver region is because of transportation. And without public transit, without an adequate or reliable way for employees to get around, then that just makes us less competitive.
Keeping in mind that transportation generally falls under, at least in a province, it's a provincial responsibility, though, right?
Correct. And at this point in time, we know that the Mayor's Council here in Metro Vancouver, as well as the provincial government, has been advocating for a permanent transit fund from the federal government. The payout for that, I believe, was set for 2026, but we are advocating for and asking for that to be implemented right away, since Surrey, at least, is at 120% ridership level pre-pandemic. So we are well over and above the ridership level that we experienced in 2019.
Let's go back to the calls now. Joyce, thanks for waiting in West Vancouver. What do you make of Trudeau stepping down and a possible replacement?
Yes, hi, Dan. Much, I guess, a bit belated, and for him as well. I am going to switch over to Jody Wilson-Raybould and Wab Canoe being in Manitoba, and here's to John Horgan. I'm 66 years old, so I've seen a lot of change over the years. Yep. I did want to bring up healthcare. I think that we really need to talk about many people throughout. Again, I heard you mention the differences between the provincial and the federal issues, but I know, having been a nurse for 42 years, I know the acuity and how hard it is, not only on families and patients who live in isolated areas, not in urban centers, who cannot get a GP, but the pressure on nurses, young nurses,
Joyce,
leaving in droves.
Forgive me, Joyce, if I can just shift you back a little bit, and I appreciate your that's a long time to be a nurse, and we appreciate it. Who would you like to see replace the Prime Minister?
The pickings are slim. I want to say that Christy Clark, in my experience, was a nightmare. I do not want to see her at the helm at all. I believe that the finance minister, and who was the deputy prime minister already,
Freeland.
Yeah, it sounds like she already has had some orientation, and I think that having seen, there was a previous caller that mentioned that, or maybe you mentioned this, Dan, that there might be many people in the wings that have been, of course, everyone talks to each other about who's going to be next up, right? I remember Trudeau, the old Trudeau, they talk to each other, but they talk to each other with respect. And I think that needs to come back. I think that we need to be proud of our country. The person that screened me to speak today mentioned that I could mention my recent visit to California and what Americans feel about Canada. But getting back to your question, I think there's some tokenism being a feminist about having a woman at the helm. I think we need to talk about what happened recently in the U.S. I heard a journalist from PBS say many of the voters' biggest fear is having a woman at the helm. It's a gender issue. So I believe that we need to look at the strength of our country and what we can be proud of. And it sounds, maybe cliche, but I'm very proud to not be American. And
Are you more proud to be Canadian then?
I found that it was strangely quiet to be in California and not see MAGA hats, and I didn't see any of that in
Joyce,
Los Angeles.
Joyce, I'm just going to wrap it up because we have a few other calls. We appreciate your time, and certainly California in the past number of elections federally in the U.S. has tilted blue and has gone Democratic, but certainly there are decent-sized pockets of Republican support within that very large state. Let's go to Ben in Fort St. John. Thanks for waiting, Ben. Who do you think ought to replace the Prime Minister?
Firstly,
you're breaking up a little bit, Ben. Can you try again?
Okay, how's that?
It's not great. I tell you what, Ben, give us a call back and we'll try and get you on the line. I'll Ben, hang up and call back and we'll do our best. I want to go back to our guest, Jasroop Gosal. Jasroop, what sort of conversations are you having, if any, with other business leaders, associations about what you're seeing from the U.S. and from what's happening in Canada right now?
Well, we are working with our counterparts in the United States, with elected officials there. We're setting up meetings with chambers of commerce in the United States, in Whatcom County, for example, as well as Blaine and Bellingham. And we are working together because the issue is that these policies, these tariffs, if implemented or when implemented, they are not only going to impact Canada's business community and Canada's residents due to job loss, et cetera. They're also going to have quite an impact on U.S. business as well that rely on input goods coming from Canada to develop their finished goods and then exporting those finished goods back to Canada. It's going to have an impact on cost of living for U.S. Residents as well, especially when we see that lumber is going to be tariffed quite highly as well, softwood lumber, as well as other goods used in construction. That's going to have an impact on their cost of living. And so we are having these on the ground conversations to ensure that we are informing residents and businesses on both sides of the border of what to expect and ways to potentially mitigate these tariffs.
I think we have Ben back on the line from Fort St. John. Thanks for rejoining us, Ben. What did you want to say?
How is this now?
Oh, brilliant.
Perfect. Okay, real quick here. I see the 5 top primary candidates being Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Dominic LeBlanc, Melanie Joly, and Anita Anand. And if I were advising them, I would recommend for them to stay out of this race, focus on government business for the next 90 days, and let one of the secondary candidates take the temporary job of Prime Minister, because let them lead into the election. After the election, take an inventory of what furniture is left, and then have a serious leadership race with the heavyweight candidates vying for the job.
You don't think they can get it done before then?
You know what? Dominic LeBlanc, Anita Anand, Melanie Joly, if they're in the middle of a leadership race, they are not looking at the 90-day period of American threat from the government that needs to be run. There are no adults in the room. If you take them out of the equation, there's nobody left to fend for what's going on. And you know what? It is going to be a temporary job. The next leader of the Liberal Party is a temporary job. It is not going to be a 4 or an 8-year position. They will not know until all the furniture is taken into inventory after the election. But I think Dominic LeBlanc and all these guys would be better served staying out of it and running at a later date. That's my opinion.
Ben, we appreciate your call, and thanks for calling us back. Clear as a bell on that one. We have heard the push and suggestion that those who are in cabinet right now, if they choose to run for the Liberal leadership, ought to step out of cabinet because, as you said, Ben, they don't want their attention being split between a very busy time and a consequential time with Donald Trump returning to the White House. Jasroop, we're going to get to this next call because it's got a business angle. Jimmy in Port Alberni, you wanted to talk about the exchange rate and what's happening now. Go ahead.
Well, I'm so shocked that everyone's concerned about the Donald and his tariffs. And right now, the American companies are streaming into Canada because the exchange rate is about 40%. So the Donald could do 25% tariffs. That's good for him because he has to pay for his tax cuts. However, it's something it's not said very often, and I'm shocked by it.
Okay, and I see what you mean. Jasroop, thanks for your call, Jimmy. I want to put this to you. The idea around, and it has not been talked about a lot, at least by the U.S. president-elect, in that he touts tariffs as a good thing. There are business leaders and political leaders in Canada that point out, well, if we're sending you our raw materials, be it oil and gas, be it forestry, if we decide to respond in kind with those tariffs, that does make those goods more expensive for Americans.
Absolutely. You're right, Dan. And I do want to just talk about not only that, but the value of our dollar being where it is right now is actually really great for Canada, because the last caller, Jimmy, was right on the mark, where it is cheaper for tourists or for companies to buy Canadian at this point in time, and for tourists to come into Canada as well, because of the strength of the US dollar, or the weakness of the Canadian dollar, however you want to frame it. But we do understand and know that these tariffs are not going to be felt, so much on Canada's side. They're going to be felt more on the U.S. side, because not only will goods be more expensive for the United States, but there will be retaliatory tariffs on the Canadian side, and there may be a limiting of goods being exported to the United States, such as electricity, which Canada or BC provides to the United States. And so these retaliatory tariffs, or these retaliatory measures, are going to have some great consequences for our U.S. neighbors.
Jasroop, in the time we have left, and it's not long, what are your plans once a leader or a replacement for Justin Trudeau has been decided, in terms of what you plan to do for outreach to the federal government? And we have about 30 seconds.
Well, we're going to continue to work with the ministers that are in cabinet right now. We're going to continue to work with the staff at the federal level. We want to make sure that the new leader, whoever that is, comes to Surrey, because Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia very soon. We're going to have a population of over 1 million people very soon. And Surrey is going to be the heart of the Metro Vancouver area. And so we need to make sure that this new leader, and when the election happens, whoever is elected, comes to Surrey to understand the needs of our business community and our residents here.
Jasroop Gosal, the spokesperson for the Surrey Board of Trade, we really appreciate your time and your insight. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure we'll chat again.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks, Sam.
And thank you for joining us on BC Today. You can listen to this program back on cbc.ca/BC.